The following presentation was recorded live for the International Association of Square Dance Callers 19th Annual Convention. We take you live to Virginia Beach, Virginia, where our session is just getting underway.
Controlling the degree of difficulty. We as callers have a responsibility to the dancers. Our theme this year is Success by Design. If we do not do our jobs because of lack of judgment, because of a lack of knowledge, and we make it impossible for the dancers, we have failed. Any idiot can stop the floor. It takes talent, real talent, to keep everybody moving. Our panelists this afternoon are going to talk to each of you and share with you their ideas and their views on how to control that degree of difficulty. The handouts which we have prepared for you are designed to give you some insights and some methodologies by which you can use to render your dance programs more effective and more pleasure for the dancers, designing success. Our panelists here on my far right, Mr. John Sybalsky from the Bay Area of California, and in the middle, Mr. Mike Jacobs from the Washington, D.C. area of Virginia, and on my immediate right, Mr. Steve Kopman from Knoxville, Tennessee. They're each going to be making a presentation. We will be discussing that, and afterwards, at the end, if we have time for questions, we will do that. This session is being taped. If you have a question, we will use the remote mic to make sure that your question is asked on the tape, or you may approach the microphone down here on the floor. The handouts which you have, the one with a large print that says Factors in Square Dance Difficulty, is a result of a 2-year program that John Sybalsky was granted 10% of his time to do this as a research project when he was working for Xerox Corporation. I think we are indeed fortunate to have the dedication and the willingness of a corporate sponsor to do this sort of work, and it has provided tremendous insights that many of us knew instinctively perhaps, but never had committed it into an outline or a form by which we could analyze and make a determination of what made choreography difficult. This session was first presented in Las Vegas last year, and this is the follow-on session. We're talking about not only in recognizing the degree of difficulty, but how to control it. So without further ado, our first speaker will be Mr. John Sybalsky.
Thank you, John. Assuming, yes, that the mic works. Great. My background is cognitive psychology, that is how your brain works. And I spent a couple of years at Xerox playing with this. I'm going to come at difficulty from looking at the limits of what your brain can do, how that affects difficulty, and then I'm going to hand off to Mike to deal with how you deal with it once you've decided to be difficult. I get the easy part. He gets to clean up afterwards. Square dancing is what is called a complex task. It doesn't seem like it, does it? But there are thousands of little things going on as you dance, and your brain's controlling all of them. Your brain has roughly 3 limits that it has to work within, and if you as a caller do something that overloads one of those limits, a square is going to go down somewhere. The limits are how much you can keep track of at once. And if I start spilling off a list of words to you, you'll get to about word 4 or 5, and then you'll stop hearing me. You can't keep that much going on. Similarly, if you give a long call description in one paragraph, people will get half a dozen words into it, and suddenly people will be going, what did he say? Where? What? Second limit, how fast you can get things back from memory. As dancers are dancing, things they're real familiar with come back with almost no delay. Things like fan the top that people don't do real commonly take a little bit of time. Things that they've heard once, maybe 6 months ago, it's going to take 3 or 4 seconds to come back. So you have to allow for that in what's going on. Finally, your brain is ticking along all the time doing things. It can do stuff only so fast. It has to decide what you're supposed to do next. It has to be looking up the call that you've just called so that you can tell what's coming. It's controlling your arms, your legs, and so forth. It ticks at about 5 things a second. If you ask the brain to do too much, for example, by calling when the dancers are in the middle of a real hard part of a call that they're concentrating on, something's going to get lost. But square dancing is not the only thing that's difficult. A lot of everyday life is that way. Walking backwards is a hard thing to do until you get some practice at it. Your brain, it copes with those difficulties in 4 ways. First of all, if I call right and left through, do you think of the 15 or 20 individual actions that go into the call? Not anymore. You've chunked it down into one thing. That has a couple of advantages. One, you're bringing one thing back from memory. Your short-term memory is dealing with only one thing instead of some number at a time. Your body reacts automatically. So it takes less brain power to do it. It takes less of this keeping track of things space. And things work a lot better. Your brain also simplifies for you even though you don't know it. I mean, everybody teaches the calls by correct definition, right? Everybody says he does anyway. And lots of people teach them that way through the class. And then people get out into the real world, and fan the top is only done from right-hand waves with the men on the ends. So if you ask a dancer, shut your eyes now, fan the top, which way is the guy going to go? He's going to head forward and to the right, because that's the way it always works. People will do that to you. The other simplifications that happen are that people start to take clues from where a hand is held, or which way they're facing, or which way they're moving. This is not quite a form of anticipation, which is to say they'll start to read ahead. I call half tag, trade, and fan the top. And where does the floor go? Okay, dancers' body flow leads you to anticipate that you're going to keep walking forward. This anticipation gives your brain extra time to do what it needs to do to catch up with what the caller said. Again, it's a way of spreading out the load so that work can go on. Finally, when something goes wrong or when something gets a little strange, you're going to try and make it feel right. You're going to try and make normal couples. You're going to try and make right-hand waves. You're going to try and be facing into the square. Something's wrong. Fix me. Fix me now. And if the fix wasn't what you wanted, it's gone. Those 3 limits and the 4 coping mechanisms lead to a whole bunch of specific things that control how difficult what you're calling is. I've got on the how hard will it be handout a checklist that starts in the right-hand column. I'm going to run through quickly those and then lead on to the second page. If a call is uncommon, it's either going to take a while to get back, so people will pause for a beat or two till the call comes back, or they're not going to remember it all and the square goes down, or in the rush, what comes back is going to be something that sounded like what you called, or maybe something that felt like what you called, or something that the name in the real world means something similar. So if you call fan the top, people will often do spin the top, assuming that they heard you wrong. And you'd be amazed. Second in line is obscure call usage. If I have a static square and I call heads, walk, and dodge, what happens? If I have a volunteer? Andy?
Bow, walk, bell, dodge.
Afraid so. How many people would have guessed that offhand? But that's what the definition says. If you're going to play with the obscure rules, you either have to cue or something's going to go. A little more legitimately, unusual formations, left-hand waves, for most of the world is unusual. That's what the definitions say, yeah. Frightening things you find out at these panels. The Choreographic Applications Committee has put out standard uses of calls. That's a pretty good guide for what the common formations and arrangements that calls are done from are, and give a basis for deciding, okay, this thing's left-handed, I'm going to have to be careful here. Or, okay, this thing's half-sashayed, something funny may go wrong, and at least as a clue to start thinking about, if you were doing it by rote, what would you watch for? Where I'm headed with all of this is, how do you plan in advance for what goes on? Unfamiliar starting arrangements. Same problem. Half sashayed fan the top. Guys by rote are going to go forward and to the right because that's what they always do. If you call it from facing lines, you get a real mess in the middle. So you've got to deal with that somehow. So be prepared for it. The making it feel right leads into the next one. Unfamiliar ending formations or arrangements. If you have a left-hand wave and want to call recycle, should the men be on the ends or in the center? They should be in the center, even though that's weirder, because that way the recycle will end in normal couples facing, which is what they're going to end in anyway, so they may as well be right. They're going to make it feel right. If you can play with that or you can play against it. And by planning accordingly, you make your material doable or impossible. There are a lot of other little critics in the back of your mind that are always going on like that. But I should end facing in. When heads lead to the right, pass through, sides score through, four sides do a partner trade, sides pass the ocean, sides recycle. And in the meantime, the heads have turned around because they're convinced they're wrong. Or I'm on the wrong side, right, from a wave with the men in the middle. Recycle. You will get normal facing couples, like it or not. Things like two men facing slide through, and suddenly there are a pair of men facing the same way. It's all, this feels wrong, I'm fixing it. In the same vein is some of the unusual uses of rules in calls. This you see perhaps more at advanced, though the recent QS call, cut the diamond, gives some possibilities. If you have a diamond with the points facing the same way, then call cut the diamond. The points slide in and, boy, they arm turn, don't they? Well, they're going to, because that's what feels normal from there. Anticipation, you can either play with or you can defeat. If you're going to defeat it, then you'd better be aware of what's normal. Swing through, boys. Run is the most common, so boys trade causes this little hiccup. Boys walk and dodge is even worse. Boys cross run is even worse. You can kind of play it up and down. Swing through, spin the top. That's right, he is from south of the Mason-Dixon line. From facing lines, pass through, wheel and deal probably. Okay. Half tag trade, roll, I did to you earlier, right? Heads lead to the right or veer left. Touch a quarter is instant death. Swing through is even instanter death. A few years ago, good English. Well English, excuse me. Engineering and English. Right. Oh, come on, I'm an engineer. I don't have to talk good. About 5 years ago, Clark Baker took a bunch of dances from callers in the New England area and typed them into a computer and looked at how often one call followed another. If you can get him to give you a copy of that list, it's a real good clue for what is and what isn't common. Your intuition's pretty good too. You've been out there. If you use uncommon call sequences, you're going to have to do something to help it. You're in the middle of Relay the Doocy with new dancers, and you're getting down to the end where it's about time for the final three-quarter cast, and you start calling the next call. They're busy concentrating on finishing the original call. There's a lot going on in short-term memory, and your first two or three words, gone. You can use flow for or against what's going on. If you have a break in flow and you do something that takes a dancer off in the wrong direction, it's going to be harder because you've taken a beat or two of thinking time away from that dancer. And so you put more pressure on him, which is going to lead to panic, which is going to lead to errors. And down you go. The subtlest is getting attention focused right. In Remake the Czar, what's the single biggest thing that you see go wrong, especially with people learning it the first time? You go a quarter and finding that other hand never happens. You've got this hand with somebody already. You're looking at that person. I've just gone a quarter. I got to find somebody to go half with. You're going to find the person you're holding on to. From an 8-chain through formation, touch a quarter and fan the top. The centers almost never have a hand held. The tension is focused toward the person you were working with, most usually. If there isn't something, then it's focused toward the center of the square. And if you do something that requires the person to find somebody out here, when I'm looking over here, I'm not going to find him. From lines, pass through, chase to the right, left, swing through. Perfectly good, but the centers won't find each other. From beginning, double, actually, better yet, dive through, centers, partner, trade. You all know that they star through, right? The reason they star through is here's this person looking at you, coming at you. That's where your attention is. You got to do something. You react. You've got a limited amount of time to react. You do the best you can. One that you don't see often outside beginner class, do-si-do, from head square through 4, do-si-do, make a right-hand star. You wouldn't think that was hard, but your attention is on the person you just did the do-si-do with, not on the other two people that you've got to make the star with. And you tend to get star-throughs for that reason. You can think of other examples pretty easily from here. Now, how do you plan for how difficult you want to make something? Now that we've looked at some of the components of what makes it difficult, let's look at some of the things that really go wrong while dancers are dancing. I'm concentrating only on the ones that if I were sitting down to write material ahead, could do something about by changing the material slightly. First thing that happens is dancers get behind or they get disoriented. This always happens when people are working kind of at the edge of what they can do. And something goes wrong, you get a beat or two behind, so you rush to catch up. And in the rush to catch up, you don't notice that you needed to touch hands with that person to do something, so you lose track of where you are, and you make another mistake, and you get more panicky, and you get behind more, and you get more panicky, and suddenly something happens and you fix it and you're down. If you're planning to try to prevent that kind of thing, you keep each challenging section relatively short and give dancers then a call or two that's normal, where their normal experience says, of course I do this as part of the call. You'll often see somebody going up to the middle and back, and suddenly you've got facing lines even if they weren't there a second ago. Similarly, you can use cliches like swing through, spin the top, right and left through that everybody can do in their sleep. In that same kind of calming down, of course I know where I am manner. More subtly, if you keep body flow working to the dancer's advantage, they're not going to get as panicky because they're going to discover that when they head in a direction that they think is right, that it was the right thing to do, and they'll be happier. Part of disorientation is I can't find who I'm supposed to work with. This is usually misfocused attention, which we were on a minute ago. The best way to deal with that is at a critical place, insert a call that gets attention focused in the right way. Now you can't do that with remake the Thar, but in lots of other cases you can do things that will get a person's attention focused where you need to have it, and then he's in business. As the tension mounts in material, panicky dancers start to fix things. They tend to make stuff normal. They make it feel right. If making it feel right makes it right, then they'll succeed. If making it feel right makes it wrong, then they're in trouble. If it feels right now, you've got a problem. There's an interesting cue. Gets a good laugh. Sometimes it gets the point across. Have you ever gone to a convention, started to call, and discovered that people are having a tremendous amount of difficulty hearing you even though there's plenty of voice and the music isn't too high? Clark likes to call this the "it's too hard, I can't hear you" phenomenon. The problem is, usually, that if they're not familiar with your calling, they're not familiar with the patterns you call, they're having to think more than they're used to, and that increased load in the brain displaces that's usually used for listening to the calls and figuring out what comes next. And so as they're concentrating on the call, they lose a word or two, and then it's, what did he say? Whoops, can't hear him. Must not be loud enough. Two best bets here. One is to insert what I like to call cliches with some frequency. It's something that people, if everybody uses it, everybody knows it, they know they heard you right. The other is, if you've called a hard call, follow it with a call with a short name, because that's going to mean you don't have to use much time to get it across. If you just decided that you're going to call something that by rote is going to head somebody in the wrong direction, then you've got to use all the tricks. You've got to make flow work the right way. You've got to make the person's attention be focused the right way. You've got to make the ending position be normal. And then, with all of that working in your favor, you can head somebody in a way that he doesn't expect, and he'll get there. If you have half-sashayed couples double pass through track 2, they go away from each other. If you make the lead couple normal, trailing couple will follow him along. And it makes it work, but it's unusual, so you get that zing of, oh boy, that was strange, but we got through it. So finally we come to the quick checklist of prevention pointers, things that you can do that'll make your material danceable, even if it's strange. You can focus attention the right way. You can keep endings normal. You keep flow correct and to your benefit. Meter the difficulty. Don't always keep it at a fever pitch. Up and down. Just like with the excitement of the evening. You don't keep it high tension all night. Don't keep it high tension all tip. Speak carefully, particularly if you've just done something hard. Give the words in the order that the dancer needs to hear them. Give the parts of the call when they need to hear them, rather than all at once. Don't overload. Mix hard calls and short calls. And give reorientation time. Plan for it in your material. And you'll have dancer success, even if you're calling pretty weird stuff.
Thank you, John Sybalsky. The couple of other things on there. A couple of other things that John could have added on there, and it has to deal with smoothness and timing. And a lot of times we sometimes ignore those for the sake of the choreographic puzzle. If indeed we are trying to design success by design, we have a responsibility to be aware of those things as well. And that is one of the items which he talks about in there, but we sometimes tend to overlook the effect of timing and the degree of difficulty. So to give you some insights on how he approaches this problem, our next speaker is going to be Mr. Mike Jacobs. Mike?
Thank you, John. Yeah, it is on. John tended to focus on the pre-dance planning to properly prepare for controlling dance difficulty. I thought that I would focus on the actual dance procedures to aid in controlling difficulty, now that you're there. But what I would like to do first is present two overviews before covering the specific problems listed by John on his worksheet. First, square dancing is a language, and like all modern languages, it has rules of grammar and construction. In written English communication, we accomplish it in the form of sentences, paragraphs, and stories. Verbal communication is best achieved if it's used in the same type of confines. So if square dancing is to be successfully communicated, it's going to have to be organized along the same way as every other language, the same constraints, and we do organize it that way. We call our sentences sequences, we call our paragraphs tips, and we call our stories dances. And that's how we organize. And just like in common with the basic structure of English language grammar, is that all good sentences and therefore sequences are structured around one idea. The problem area that John has mentioned should always be approached as the key idea structure that your sequence is built around. Multiple idea sequences, just like run-on sentences, overwhelm the people that you're trying to communicate with. And as a personal aside, I would like to make an issue about something we passed at CALLERLAB a number of years ago. We talked about putting people in lines of 4 in order to restore them back to the dancing routine. And unfortunately, I think it destroyed an aspect of square dancing that was very successful for us years before. And that was the carrot-stick basis of how we work our square dancing. The carrot is successfully getting to the element left and the right and left grand and getting back home. And the stick is the punishment of breaking down. But what happens is that after we've broken these down with very long run-on sequences, the people get back in lines of 4, dance for a little while longer, don't come to a successful conclusion, and thus can't figure out what they did wrong. We leave them very frustrated. The most important thing we need to do is have succinct, short sequences that people can be feeling rewarded for by getting to their conclusion successfully. The second overview that I'd like to make is, some years ago, Jim Mayo wrote an article that dealt on the content of our dances and how we call them, that we make constant many decisions in the course of calling tips or even individual sequences. I'd like to carry that process just a step further by pointing out that we also do triage based upon the results of those decisions. Now, what's triage? Triage is a medical term that you may be familiar with if you watch MASH or other medical episodes. What it basically does is that given a situation where a large number of casualties come in, that the doctor in charge or the nurse in charge looks at the casualty and divides them into 3 groups. First off, there's those that will survive without your help. Secondly, there are those that will survive only if they get your help. And unfortunately and reluctantly, there are those that will not survive no matter how much help you give them. And that describes exactly how we call every dance and every sequence. We too as callers must make these decisions from the microphone to judge how much help we can be to the dancers. And most importantly, how to be the most effective with our time and the dancers' times. Talking to squares that are totally confused, talking in a babble with each other, not recognizing forward positions, you've seen them, is a waste of your time and the dancers' times. It's better to pull the plug and take away their life support and go on with the next sequence. We have one advantage over doctors. We can resurrect our dead on the next sequence, and so we need to take advantage of it. Let's get down to the specifics that John talked about. There's no need to avoid all these problem areas if you analyze them for what causes the problem and try to circumvent the results. The overwhelming philosophy has to be dancer accessibility. That is, how can I give a clue to solving the problem without making the solution so easy, so meaningless, and so worthless as to why bother to expend the effort? Let's look at John's categories. Number 1, he talks about uncommon calls. And his example that he cites there is fan the top. But if you set it up so that it resembles spin the top by preceding it with a boxonette, you end up duplicating a call they already feel comfortable with. You have committed the right hand already, and therefore the natural tendency to want to alternate hands lends them to want to use the left hand for the fan the top action. If you end up also going at it first from a situation where you're in half sashayed lines, and then it duplicates the spin the top they're most comfortable with. In other words, with John's words, we make it feel right. Let's look at obscure call usage. In the situation where John talked about in the walk and dodge, where the bow did the walk and the bell did the dodge, then body flow becomes an important factor here. You can lend to the dancer's success simply by preceding that walk and dodge action with the flutter wheel. The one on the left has the walking action, the forward move action from the flutter wheel, and the one on the right has a sliding action from the flutter wheel, so that it's natural tendency to want to dodge over. You've headed towards dancer success with a call from an unusual position. Unusual formations. You find the easiest one to succeed one and build towards the harder. Now, you look at John's example here. John talks about peel the top from a left-hand wave. Well, obviously, that's not the first thing you do out the bat. The first thing you wouldn't want to do is try to peel the top from left-handed columns. And therefore, it seems very similar to the standard setup that you do peel the top from. Also, then isolate 4 dancers in the middle with it angled the same way you're going to set up the ocean wave peel the top from. And then finally, make the setup available so that you can cue to the sex of the people. So that when you finally do hit the final left-hand wave, you've done enough examples of it that you've maximized the dancer's possibility of success. The next category that John talked about was the unusual start. And just the opposite solution is to be applied. You make the formation normal. If I'm going to reverse roles on Relay the Deucing and have the boys start in the middle, the girls start at the end, then I'm certainly not going to compound the felony by putting them into a left-handed ocean wave. I'm going to put them in as standard position as possible and then just change the one factor so you don't overwhelm them with choices. Unusual endings. Again, make it accessible. As you can see a pattern through all these things, sex is a universal identifier. And for what you gather by the pattern, sex is the easiest form of communication, but I don't need to tell you that. There are two things that happen normally when mistakes get made. 90% of the mistakes that get made on the floor is either the wrong facing direction is adopted or they've exchanged positions with the partner. The way you solve the problem is get them to turn around or to trade with the person they mistakenly traded with. And when you look at John's examples in this category, that's how we can solve the problem. If the half-sashayed slide-through results in lines facing out, what they did to make themselves feel right by facing in is solved by having the people turn around. And the cue is obviously slide through now that we're all facing out, and they've picked up the information. Look at some of the other examples. You must analyze the calls where the potential mistake has been made, and then provide the extra clue. And that's a real important word we're going to talk about in the next category. Provide the extra clue that will help them be successful. John talked about it on the recycle. Talk to the girls. Tell them that they're the leads on the action and stay in control of the fellows they're working with. Make a joke out of it. On the half-sashayed wheel and deal, remind them after the pass-through to take hands before they do the wheel and deal. Because where they get re-sashayed again is because they start to do the movement individually. On the slide-through, the boys working with each other and ending up with right hands. Remind them they have that at the conclusion. All those are clues that we can help them be successful with. Plus, by analyzing what the possible mistake is, you can take a step to cure it once you see the mistake made. Look at the next category of unusual call rows. Cueing calls is bad for 4 reasons. Number 1, the dancers never learn the call. They just listen for the clutch of the cues that you always provide for them, and they never ever recognize what to do with the name. Secondly, dancers who have taken the time to learn the calls are never rewarded for their knowledge. Third, dancers who know the call may intercept the cue as a command if it's given too slowly. Correspondingly, dancers who have hearing problems may not be able to digest the cue if it's delivered too fast because it all runs together. The preferred methodology should be cluing. Just put the L back into the word. If we give clues as examples to be able to help the dancer execute the call, for this scenario, for instance, they may be able to, I can't read this too well. I've got to look at my handwriting. They may be able to use clues in helping finding the direction, the sexual composition of the formation, the handedness of the formation, or even what kind of formation it is. Cluing like, let's take for example an 8-chain through setup where we have the same sex adjacent to each other. And let's say we have the boys on the inside, the girls on the outside. So in delivering the call, we say square through 3, and the boys coming to the middle with the left hand. What we did was provide information that, yes, the boys are ending up in the middle, and yes, they're about to use their left hand on the next call. You've effectively set up the next call for this delivery. You've also given them reinforcement that what they've done is right, and if they've done something wrong, we've given them information to be able to correct things with. Look at some of the other examples that John lists. The push cast off 3/4. Well, that's going to end up with the line of 4 facing in. So very naturally, follow it with up to the middle and back. Those that didn't successfully get to that point know they've got to turn around to do that, and you provided the hint. The cut the diamond example that John used. The reason the gentleman makes a mistake on the cut the diamond is because he tries to flip over to get an arm handhold and do the trade that way, which means that he made his mistake by changing his facing direction. What we would like to do is make the next call something he can only accomplish by being facing in. Ideally would be the centers past the ocean. By knowing that he's facing out and there's nobody to work with, he knows he needs to turn around. And you've given that clue instead of a cue that can help make him work at being successful rather than you leading him through it all. Unusual call patterns. Anticipation is the problem. Timing is the answer. Give the call that is not anticipated farther in advance so that you change their thinking process in advance of when they actually need to be able to do it. You want to change presumption? Deliver half-tag, trade, fan the top that way as opposed to half-tag, trade, and fan the top. They've already gone into what they expect to do as opposed to what you've actually called. Give it far enough in advance, you're not really rushing them. You're providing them with the information to make effective dancing. On the next category of overloading, again, timing is the answer, but you apply it differently. You slow the delivery of all the information down so that when they are about to need it, they get the information, not 10 minutes ahead of time. And you look at John's example there, which I don't blame him for not going over in great detail, but you see how well you follow this. Spin chain the gears, well, let me turn the stars a half. Men, when you meet, trade. Heads, if you meet, do a U-turn back each time. Ladies, spread. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people have memorized that already, but another way of doing that is also making the decision ahead of time of, was this necessary? Obviously it wasn't, but somewhere along the line you do have to make some decisions of adjusting things. Sometimes you want to test the dancer's knowledge of how the call is set up. Sometimes you want to be able to provide new dance patterns without having to create new names. Those are good philosophies. But adding up to this amount is just too much, and it's just something that needs to be always rejected. Breaks and flow. Never, ever, 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 we could do this for the next 20 minutes, disrupt the flow of the dance, supposedly to provide challenge in the dancing. That just means you're shirking your job. If the flow patterns, though, are something you want to change, consider the idea of square stoppage. Just simply stop what you're doing, give them a beat or two in place. There's nothing wrong with taking a beat or two in place and keeping in rhythm, at the same time not advancing in any particular direction. You've broken that flow pattern, so you can start a new one. Finally, focusing wrong attention. Again, we use cluing in order to refocus the attention to the proper place. John's example of do-sa-do, follow with stick up a right and make a right hand star. We've given the clue without cueing it. To touch a quarter. Well, maybe in that situation you might want to duplicate the touch a quarter by stepping to a wave, follow your neighbor and spread and scoot back. That's done all the touch a quarter action, and now you can go into the fan the top without having to remind dancers of where you need to go next. The situation of the beginning double pass-through setup and wanting to do the center's partner trade. Well, it'll depend upon the previous example. John talked about doing dive-through in the center's partner trade, and that, of course, means they're moving forward, which is not really a good idea. But if you're in a situation where you really want a center's trade, just remind them they're working beside themselves. It doesn't necessarily mean you've added a lot of verbiage to what you're doing. It doesn't really mess up the timing of the situation, but you provided that one clue that it makes it possible for them to perform the call. These are all suggestions for solving the problems that John delineated, but they're suggestions from functioning from behind the microphone rather than planning it out ahead of time. Remember that you can increase the difficulty of the whole situation by simply withdrawing those clues and not having to provide all that other extra information, and that will increase the difficulty without adding more calls from another level, without having to add experimentals to your calling. What this does do, it forces you to make planning, it forces you to use knowledge, it forces you to be a professional, and I think that's what we owe the dancers. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as Mike had said, when you use the term swing through and boxinette to a fan the top, that's fine as long as everyone is going to do the boxinette correctly. But how often do you see the dancers at an angle so that the centers don't indeed come together? Perhaps we as callers would have other opportunities to make fan the top, for an example, easier if we did it from a boys facing in wave to do a scoot back, single hinge, and as the girls come together, they have the left hand free. Fan the top is almost assured 100% success. So that's another aspect of our job. Our job here as the panelists is not to try to tell you how we can make it creatively, choreographically correct and impress the dancers. They don't care as long as they win. They don't necessarily know whether the dance program is basic, mainstream, plus, advanced, or anything else. They know whether they made it or they didn't make it. And our job as callers is to let them make it. We want to design success for the dancers. Success by design. And the things that John and Mike have talked about enable you to do that. And those little clues. How often do you get annoyed at a round dance cuer if they're cueing dancing shadows and they get their motor mouth going the whole time? Does it happen to any of you? Do you suppose our dancers feel the same way if we insist on cueing every word of a teacup chain? They say, shut up and let us dance. And that's what we have to make that judgment call as well. What are we doing as callers to help the dancers, not interfere? Dancers will have a good time if we can just remember to stay out of their way. Truly. To get into another approach on the same subject with a different viewpoint on it, our next caller is someone who is well known for choreography and wizardry and all that sort of stuff. With a name like Kopman, what do you expect? Mr. Steve Kopman.
The problem that I see is that everything that John and Mike talked about for over a half hour, you have to do immediately when you're calling. And that is so difficult that while you're trying to be creative, if you're not writing things down, if you're just calling extemporaneously, that is so difficult to do when you're on the spot in front of 8 or more people that are expecting you to just roll the stuff off. And that's part of the difficulty of exactly what we're trying to do, is to make it where you'll be able to roll it off and get comfortable. And it just takes practice, and it just takes work. What I'm going to do is I would like to get a square of dancers up here and to see if we can put this 30 or 40 minutes of background that we just talked about, put it into use. And I think for the purpose of everybody, because we have a table up front, if we can have everybody slide all the way down so that you fill up all the sheets, I'm going to just get a square right over here. I need 4 men and 4 women.
It would help if we had 4 women as well. Because
I think I counted about anybody. 4 women. But if we can get everybody just to slide down this way, because I think it'll be very beneficial to for visual purposes. So fill up every seat. Fill up every seat. Don't leave any spaces. And give me 4. I need 4 men and 4 women. Quickly. Okay. We got 1. Harry, you come on up here. That's 2. Come on, guys. Give me 2 more. I'm probably going to need just about all the women, so don't sit down, girls. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 guys. I got 1, 2 girls. I need 2 more girls. 2 more girls. I'm okay on guys. Need 2 more girls. There's 1. Go ahead, Nancy. Just make a square. Yeah, and don't fall off. Yeah, move up here. No, I don't need a record. Whether you get your original partner back is not important to me right now. So I'm not going to look to get them to their corners or to get them back to this original position. What I want to do is to take calls that you would commonly call and maybe with one different little thing make it creative. How many of you get American Square Dance Magazine? Okay. I was lucky enough to work with the man, John Salinas, in March to do an article that's supposed to come out every month called Kopman's Creative Choreography or Kopman's Choreography Corner. The first article I sent him was almost 2 pages, and he crunched it down into about 6 little lines that I wrote to him, and I said, John, I wrote this article, and I don't understand the way it's reading right now. So he turned around and wrote the one in April exactly the way I sent it to him, and it's very clear and very easy to understand. We're going to expand on that right now. For example, have the head couples. You guys be the heads. Head square through 4. Touch a quarter. Scoot back. When I say the word boys, what would 99% of the callers say at this point after a scoot back? Boys, run. Well, honestly, if we all say boys run, why should the dancers come to you? You want to be creative so they come back to you week after week. You want to be interesting so they get their money's worth week after week. So instead of saying boys run, I can say 2 different calls, really similar, but watch what happens. Boys fold. Now, nobody is incapable at any level when I say boys fold, and I may say boys fold behind the girls behind or something to be cute to make sure that they're paying attention. But now look what happened. Instead of saying boys run, which 99% of the callers say, I've just said boys fold, and I've gotten into a different situation. Now, to be creative on the spot takes a lot of smarts. You have to immediately now say, okay, I folded him. Boy, they're going to come back to me, except for one thing. I don't know how to get out of this situation. Because I want them to dance. I don't want to trick them. I just want to be creative. So what can I do? Let's have the girls pass through. Who can give me a quick call that would take a situation like this and make it very comfortable? Star through is perfect. Do that. Beautiful. Let's have the boys trade and roll to face each other, and the girls face in right behind them. Girls face in, including Nancy. Boys pass through. Okay. I now have a situation similar to before. I have 4 of the same sex in the middle, and I have outside people that are same sexes together. You just gave me star through. So what else can I do? Would it be good to say right and left through here? Okay, touch a quarter is perfect. Do that. All the girls in the middle trade and roll to face each other. Boys face in behind them. By the way, did you notice when I said trade and roll, I added to face each other? Mike talked about that for a little bit. It prompts them a little bit. I'm on their side. I want to be creative and I want them to get it. Well, how can I be creative and want them to get it? I can help them just a little bit. If I just said girls trade and roll, they may not end up like this. But when I say girls trade and roll to face each other, you can be sure this is exactly how they're going to end. Okay, girls in the middle. Now, before I said pass through, and then you suggested that we say star through. That was great. But now I have a situation again. I had a scoot back, and the boys fold, and this is the formation we're in. We have all 4 girls where? In the middle. And we've got boys behind them. Well, I said pass through before and then star through. What else can I have the girls do? Can I say right and left through from here? Okay, you would want to say right and left through because it's getting beyond them. You're creative, but if you're standing up there and your mouth is going, and you're the only one moving, because the dances are all broken down, they're not coming back to you anymore. You want them dancing. So what else can I have the girls do besides pass through? Square through 3 is good. Girls square through 3. What would I say now? Okay, stay right here. The girls are to square through 3, which means they went right hands, left hands, right hands. Their left hand is available. Sometimes you would get into a problem with this when you're just rolling the stuff out and calling extemporaneously, and you'll say girls square through 3 and touch a quarter. Why wouldn't you say touch a quarter? Girls are using right hands on a touch a quarter. Well, they just did a square through 3 and pulled by with their right hand. You're making them use the same hand twice. That's not good. So after we have them square through 3, now we can have them star through. You gave me that before after a pass through. Let's do it again. All the couples circulate just like this. Bend the line of 4. Star through. Now from here, touch a quarter. Let's go back into the same idea. Everybody scoot back. And we just did the boys fold, correct? And we had all 4 girls in the middle, and we had the girls pass through, and then we had the girls square through 3. So we just got creative with one call. All we did was take boys run and replace it with boys fold, and I just got 2 or 3 more sequences to play with. That's a whole tip I can work out now. Well, I just use boys fold. How about if I have the boys in the same line trade with each other? Well, now that's pretty neat. We just took one call, boys trade, and I will always say boys in the same line because these guys will be looking at every square to find another boy to trade with who's not in the same line with them. So I will help them by saying boys in the same line trade with each other. Well, that's great, but I got a little problem from here. What's my problem? They're all half sashayed. A quick thing to fall into is boys. You say boys trade, and now, okay, they're in a line of 4, do a right and a left through. Are they going to be successful if you call a right and a left through from here? No way. That's not going to work. How can I quickly call something to get them normal? Give me one step. Okay, I heard 2. Now we'll take them both. The first one was box the nat that I heard. So do that, box the nat. And then I'll say drop hands, and you've got a line of 4. Now notice what I'm doing is I'm not just saying box the nat, but because I'm being creative, I'm prompting them with some extra little words. Because when you say box the nat, How many times after a box spinat, no matter how many times you tell the dancers, do they end up like this? They don't face each other half the time. But when I say box spinat, you got a line of 4, you can be sure they're going to fix themselves. And I don't have to say, John face Mary, Mary face, Tony. I don't have to do that. I've just given them a little help. All right, do a right and a left through. Roll away with a half sachet. This is where we were, correct? We had a line of 4 and we were half sachet. One of you said box spinat, which was great. But then also, unless you're going to do something like a right and a left through after it, stop it, drop hands, make a line of 4. The next thing I heard was, I think, touch a quarter, correct? Touch a quarter. This is great. I'm in a column. So what happens if now I'm in a column and I'm calling extemporaneously and I'm being creative? And what happens from here if I say coordinate? You know it. So now look what's happening. Look how difficult this is. You're rolling the choreography out. You're instantaneously trying to be creative, but you also have to be careful because you want the dancers to be successful. What can I call from here? Let's do one. Give me one. Circulate. Great. Circulate. Okay, so let's do another circulate. Go ahead. And I'll put you back in the same basic position. We're in a line of 4 in an unusual position to do coordinate. Give me another call. Single hinge is terrific. Do that. Now I'm in a grand ocean wave. Now if I did a single hinge, what would be a real good thing to call now? Okay, a fan the top is perfect, and we just talked about doing a fan the top before. Mike had said from a box spinat, if you're half sachet, you fan the top, you're right into it. Well, here it is again. How many of you would say maybe grand swing through? Okay, let me tell you a little problem with that. Unhinge. Go back to where you were before you hinged.
I love it.
If I hinge a quarter, do that. Well, they've already used that right hand on the call. I wouldn't want them to use the same hand again immediately. So I may say after a partner hinge, have the girls trade. I would be a little bit afraid, to be honest with you, after that hinge to say fan the top. You know why? Because of these two guys. These two guys in a square are usually the least intelligent. Because as soon as I say fan the
Silvertongue has a way with words, doesn't he?
as soon as I say fan the top, you know what they're going to do? They're going to cast. And what I'm going to end up is with a major problem. So I may say, with a right hand hinge a quarter, if I'm going to call fan the top, I'll say in each wave, fan the top. Or I'll say, center boys drop hands, fan the top. Yeah, they're not, the wind isn't in their face, they're standing still for a second, but they're also getting through some of the creative choreography. But instead of saying after a single hinge and fan the top, I'll let the girls trade. Girls do that. Now, in each wave, recycle. Now, the point of saying each wave recycle is because of my two unintelligent boys in the center. Because they're going to want to work in the center with each other. So if you're not going to do a grand swing through and the boys run and wheel and deal, if you're not going to do the same patterns that you normally do, think about ways to help them get through it. Let's do another one. Do a right and a left through. Dixie style, do an ocean wave. And what do we always tell the boys to do? We always tell the boys to trade. In fact, if I'm calling, and if I say boys, they're going to trade. I don't have to say trade. I'll say boys, and they'll all do it. And I will make them untrade. I said, I know what you want to do. Okay, well, I want to be creative. So I just have a nice situation where I said, Dixie style, do an ocean wave. Would I say left swing through? Why not? Well, we just used our left hand to swing in. So here they just swung each other in, and if I just say left swing through, I got a problem. They're not going to left swing through with each other. They're going to start with this hand almost every time. So watch what we can do to be creative. Let's have the boys do a U-turn back for now. This is not part of it. And bend the line. I'm going to call the sequence and vary instead of the boys trade. Watch how nice it flows. Do a right and a left through. Dixie style do an ocean wave, and then the boys cross run around the furthest girl, you have an ocean wave. Now look how neat. It's not a boys' trade, which everybody calls, and I have just gotten them into an easy right-hand ocean wave. I don't care if they have their partners now, I don't care who they have. I have a wave that I can deal with because they can deal with it. Swing through. Boys run, bend the line. Let's try another one. Do a right and a left through. Dixie style do an ocean wave. Boys hinge a quarter. Girls do a U-turn back and check your diamonds. Boy, without any difficulty, without using any calls below what the first 15 or 20 calls on the basic list, we have gone from a Dixie style to an ocean wave where 90% of the callers say boys trade, to right-hand ocean waves that are easy for them to do, or right-hand diamonds with the boys in the middle. Boys swing through. In each diamond, flip the diamond. Girls trade.
Now,
Recycle.
Can I interrupt a second, Steve?
Yep.
You just noticed what he did with the trade. That was that neutered flow that I talked about. You know, what he did there was, by having the two girls trade in the center, he stopped the flow of the fellas. They stood there for the few beats that it took to do the trade and stopped their forward motion and their lateral motion, and now he had freedom to choose anywhere he wanted to go at that point in time.
Star through. Touch a quarter. This is going to be the last one that I plan to focus on, unless we end up getting into more things because of you. Because this is probably the most tricky, but it is very unusual. We have a column, and I'm going to ask just the center 4 people in the column to do a walk and dodge. Now, that could sometimes pose a problem, especially from here, when you have the boys dodging and the girls walking, because we don't often call a walk and dodge that way. Normally it's after a touch a quarter and you say walk and dodge and the boys are walking and the girls are dodging. So I've just reversed that. And look at this situation now. To me, this is like a pot of gold. This is what I live for when I'm doing my choreography. Because I want to be different than all of you. Because I want your dancers to come to me when I'm calling it a festival. And they're going to say, yeah, boy, this guy is different. What a treat to find out that I'm different than other people. I like being different. That's how I grew up. So now I've just done a walk and dodge in the middle, and I have a major problem on my hands. You may not all be able to see the reason why this is major. Let's do this. All the boys pass through, and everybody face in. And now star through. First couple California twirl, veer to the left, bend the line. Pass through, bend the line again, and touch a quarter. I'm sure there was an easier way to do that. Center 4 only do a walk and dodge again. Okay, now you may be able to see this a little clearer. The outsides are in a mini wave. They're holding right hands. Boy, I got a weird situation here how to get out of it. I did it real quick before. Let's have the boys pass through with each other. Am I better off than I was before? No. And let me tell you why I'm not better off, for those of you that were saying, yeah. Now I got a great little mini box in the middle that I had before. I just got one little problem on the outside. They're all facing the same way. The fact that they're half sashayed, I got a problem here. I got people facing one way, and I got 2 different people here facing another. Well, watch how easy. Everybody face in. And I've got a line of 4. A little unusual because I've got same sexes. But look how easy I got out of that little mini wave. And that happens quite a lot. You don't want to go through major things. Star through. California twirl. Centers pass through. Touch a quarter. All the girls run around the boy. Touch a quarter again. Just the center 4 do a walk and dodge. I was about 15 years old, and I was on a weekend with my father, who's Lee Kopman, and he let me get up and do a tip. And I get into a situation like this, and I put the centers in, and we're casting off 3/4 and rolling somebody, and this one does a half a circulate, and from the middle of the floor, a white handkerchief comes out. He was surrendering to me. And I thought I was a genius while I was calling this. But there's a little problem. I was the only thing moving in the whole floor, and it was just my mouth. So the key and the point to the whole thing is this. Be creative. Challenge yourself. Why can't I do this? Why can't I call that? But do it in a way that the dancers can deal with. Watch this. All the girls pass through and face the boys' shoulders. Now, I'm going to get into weird situations if I'm not prepared or if I've never practiced or dealt with this before. Just the boys do your part of a track 2. Girls extend to a two-face line. Now, that's not something you're necessarily going to think of if you've never done this before. But what happens? All the boys face in.
That's known as
Yeah, boys go ahead and face in. Okay, this didn't come in a dream. This didn't come because I sat watching television. This came, number one, from having Lee Kopman as a father is a big factor. Because for 35 years, I'm 35 years old, for 34 years, I've been knocked on the head with choreography. Most of you don't have Lee Kopman. None of you, I hope, have Lee Kopman as a father besides me.
I didn't want to mention this, Steve. But...
You don't look anything like me. The point being is, yeah, there's only maybe one Lee Kopman. But that doesn't mean with a little bit of effort and a little bit of work on your part, you can learn to be creative. It doesn't come by magic. You put checkers down, you practice. You work with your checkers, and you're able to be creative spontaneously. Girls do a wheel and deal. To face each other, and then the girls pass through. Here comes back to that original situation where we had girls in the middle. Everybody touch a quarter. 4 boys trade. Run around the girl. Bend the line. How about a big hand for this square? Good job. Best square on the floor.
Thank you very much, Steve. When we talk about this degree of difficulty, we talk about how to control it. Let's not just limit how we control the degree of difficulty while we're calling festivals or things of that nature and weekends. Let's keep this in mind as we are doing our teaching. If you are working in the Plus program or whatever program you happen to be working at, and you wish to give them the variations of the formations and or the arrangements, you know, I'm sure all of you do, that there are 6 and only 6 arrangements of any given formation. And if you wish to dance the dancers within those 6 arrangements, there is going to be a degree of difficulty in whatever call it is that you do from those formations. For instance, if we took load the boat from facing lines of 4, and the lines of 4 are normal, you would expect how much degree of success? 100%, would you not? Because everybody is in the normal position. What is the next arrangement which is next easiest, and why? If you have the boys or the girls, but preferably the boys on the right end of the line, because the center boy and the center girl are in their normal position. They're comfortable with that, and the end dancers don't have the hard part. And as John mentioned and as Mike brought out, that if we're able to help them, you end up boys facing boys and girls facing girls. You help them with the ending formation and arrangement in such a way that they're able to succeed. You haven't given them any complexity necessarily. It's different, but it's also relatively easy. Well, if you've done the boys on the right end of the line, you might try it with the girls on the left of the line. And then you try it with the same sexes in the middle. That's all easier than the last one, which is the half sashade, because at least 50% of the square is in their normally expected position and arrangement. And if we as callers don't consider that as we're teaching, we have failed, have we not? Because we haven't designed success for the dancer. And there are a lot of different things that we brought out in these handouts that John made up and that are in there that you should be thinking about. It's not an isolated case. When Mike Jacobs was talking about the article that Jim Mayo wrote on microprogramming, those constant decisions, you have several choices at any point in your choreographic routine. where you can choose a conscious decision to make it difficult or easy. We haven't really addressed this problem until about 5 or 6 years ago. Once we had the formations named and the arrangements agreed upon as to what we could do, we then created the other opportunities to look at how we make something easy or how we make something difficult. And the effort that people like John Sybalsky had done with this study over a 2-year period to quantify these things, to codify, if you will, that gave us the opportunity to look at it from the standpoint that what can we do as the professionals to let the dancers win? Now, having said that, let me give you 2 additional factors. CALLERLAB does not recommend that you go out and necessarily try to do all the possible weird things just to be different. Don't leave this convention or this session and say, CALLERLAB says we should do this. We should have those crazy things where we have 3-in-1 columns. The way Steve handled it, it was very easy to see it and get out of it. But I would suspect that most of your regular routine dancers that you see don't have the talent that the square that had up here on the stage. Even if we did have the dumb ones in the middle, Steve. But also you should realize that CALLERLAB has put out a couple of other documents that I want to talk about. First with Charlie Muff, then followed by Stan Burdick, and currently with Jerry Reed as the chairman of the Choreographic Applications Committee. They have put together 2 booklets which are available through the CALLERLAB office up there. The first is the mainstream applications. It divides the mainstream program with a scenario, if you will, of what is most commonly used, what is most commonly called for each of the calls, what is the most common formation, and what sort of difficulty you're going to have if you vary either the formation or the arrangement. Now, there are some calls that you'll get 100% success regardless of the formation and regardless of the arrangement if it's legal according to the definition. There is a companion document that has been done, just recently approved, on the plus program calls. If you don't already have those, you should have those, you should study those. You should use them in your teaching. They are superb documents because they have taken a long period of study as to what we can expect dancer success rate. Several examples that are very easy to see. I bet you all will come up with the same answer. Call a wheel and deal from facing lines. What success rate do you expect? Not too much. If you call something else, if you call a pass-through and a crossfire from facing out lines, what success would you expect? Kind of iffy, but it depends on the setup. Of that particular setup, then you're going to find that it's going to be easiest if you have boys on the left of the line facing out and girls on the right, because the center couple is normal. And the ending formation is a standard quarter tag. Just as John said, they're going to fix it whether we want them to fix it or not. But if we can pre-plan it and we can work on it such a way that they succeed, then we have done our job as callers and we have built success by design. So it's not an isolated just for festivals, just for weekends, but in your teaching, in your workshopping, all of those things, keep these factors in mind and you will be better able as the professional to control the degree of difficulty. Now we do have a floor mic up here. We do have this on tape, so if you have any questions, we have about 15 minutes or so before we wind this all up for you to have questions or observations which you would care to make, or any additional members of the panel would like to make observations on some of the presentations. Please use the microphone, or we can use the portable mic and hand it around. But we do want to get this on tape because it is being taped for those of you who are not those of you who are not here, but those people who buy the tape without having been at this session.
There's 2 things that I kind of want to wrap up or stress from my standpoint. 2 critical things when you're being creative. Number 1, you do it quickly and easily. Don't take a long time to set up the formation. And for heaven's sake, if you're going to be creative and you may lose some people, don't take a long time to knock it down. The second most important thing besides being creative quickly and easily is don't sacrifice body flow for creativity. Think about that. Don't sacrifice body flow for creativity. Simple example. Double pass through, they bend the line. Well, that stinks. That's terrible body flow. But you say, well, I'm going to show the dancers the difference between what I'm going to say now. But do a double pass through, run. Now I have an unusual line. If you can visualize, I have a line where the center 2 of the line are facing out and the end 2 are facing in. How do I get it back and everybody's facing in?
I don't know girls are. I'm going to get myself back into a comfortable line. So think about that. Look at sacrificing body flow. Double pass through. New centers trade. Instead of and it's being different without sacrificing square dancing, because the most important thing is dancing. And you want to keep them dancing, I don't care what, to being successful.
I think callers we need to call with care. The callers are called with malice. That, unfortunately, is what bludgeons the dancers into leaving or disliking certain calls or having unsuccessful nights. It's because of the tools we have improperly.
The floor. Okay, yes.
John, you have a flyer here called,
yes.
You say at the very top, the dancers expect, here it is, style to an ocean wave. Some callers today, ladies lead for and encourages the blah. I sense that as callers, there's to start listening to things that we know they're going to get with other callers when they go to dances and festivals. And we know that we have got to start to teach them to forget the old cliche words. And I think that us as callers within our own clubs have that first responsibility to teach them to listen so that these things don't appear to be incorrect. So when they go to dance to Steve Kopman at his dance and he wants to do something that's a little creative, they're not going to feel like they don't know how to dance, because as soon as he uses a couple of key words, they take it as meaning something that we as the club caller have conditioned them to dance to.
Okay. When John talked about the degree of difficulty, and he talks about the conditioned reflex, we can also go back to smooth dancing and body flow and so forth. Dancers have a certain degree of anticipation. And we teach them, if they hear ladies lead Dixie style, that the men move to the right to prepare to receive that girl's left hand and make that turn, did we not? At the same point in time, if that dancer is conditioned when he hears ladies lead to move to his right for a Dixie style, and we have said flutter wheel, he's moving to his right, but the body flow is to the left. That's going to be awkward, and it is going to cause a breakdown because of the words we have used based on the conditioned reflex of the dancer. That's a part of life, whether we like it or not, whether we say they should be able to react. The fact is, they may not react, and we may be misleading them by our choice of words as to how they're going to move their bodies in order to do that.
I also think that it's a matter of also training dancers to eliminate garbage words that another caller may put in. That some things are his personal style and approach and his semantics, and we need to be able to tell dancers how to tell the difference between the two.
I guess my point is that we can, as callers, call ladies lead with that same type of positioning and have our club dancers learn to do different things. We can call ladies lead to do a swing through. That still has the men move over. It still puts the ladies in a nice position. But we have to teach our dancers that just because something was called 10 years ago and the key words were used, that doesn't mean that new people today and new callers are still going to use those key words in the same way. We got to teach them that they got to expect different things to happen. We can't say, well, we're never going to call a ladies lead because that's only dedicated for Dixie style to an ocean wave.
Okay. Will you accept the fact that there are right answers, there are maybe incorrect answers, and there are opinions? Will you accept that this is an opinion? And in my opinion, I feel this misleads the dancers. If you're using a ladies lead for something else, I, as a dancer, would object to it, because when this body gets in motion, it tends to remain in motion for a while. And I would be going that way, and you want me to go somewhere else. I got a problem. John?
This is actually a funny case, because normally you teach flutter wheel well ahead of Dixie style to a wave. And in the teaching and early youth stages, you probably would want to say ladies lead flutter wheel to get the ladies headed in the right direction. But then once you have gone to Dixie style to a wave, you'd want to deprecate that and get rid of it, would be my bet.
Yes, here. Frank?
Yeah. Talking to Steve, when we had the girls in the middle and the boys behind them, with them in a double track type setup, is there a different way that you would phrase Dixie style to a wave so that you wanted just those center four to lead Dixie style to a wave, as opposed to girls pulling by and left, with the boys?
Yeah, first of all, I wouldn't call it. If I really wanted to be totally creative, I guess, and it was a very unusual group, what I would have said to do what you want, I think, if I understand the question, is after the boys fold, I would tell the four girls in the middle to do a right and a left through, and then go Dixie style to an ocean wave. I wouldn't call that. But if I wanted them to Dixie style to an ocean wave that way, that's what I would do. I would say, okay, I'm going to put them in something that they're used to, a double pattern. I think John had talked about, if you're going to do something unusual, give a little easy step at the beginning or the end. But technically, maybe not technically, but on a better approach, if you wanted to do it the other way, a normal Dixie style, you really should say on the double track. Dixie style. So if I wanted the boys to fold, and then I would say on a double track Dixie style to an ocean wave, then all the girls would shake right hands and pull by and swing the next woman with the left. But if I wanted just the center forward to do it in the middle, the only way that I would even think to maybe do that, I would first have them do a right and left do. I'd say 4 girls in the middle do a right and left do and just do 4 Dixie style.
Would the dancers know what a double track is?
Well, I think that if they don't know what the double track, I don't think it's going to take away from doing it. I don't think that as soon as they hear the word double track, they're going to say, oh, I can't do that. Because you'll say on the double track, girls lead Dixie style to an ocean wave, right, left. You're putting the girls in the normal position that they'd be in to Dixie style anyway. So yeah, double track may be frightening to some, but it also, there's some technicality there, because why not, if you just say Dixie style to an ocean wave, then why not just the center 4 do it with each other? So somewhere along the line, when you're being creative, there is technicalities that you got to deal with, and that's a good question.
Plus, you got to consider that as long as we're working on this continent, it doesn't hurt to speak English. Words like girls only, there's not a square dance command called only, but certainly they'll understand what you're talking about.
And certainly, ladies lead would be a pretty good clue in that particular case. The other thing that goes with that, with the dancer's tendency to fix it and what feels right, whether they understood the double track or not, they will fix it to 2 left-hand waves, which is what you wanted them to do in the first place. Our job as callers is to tell the dancers who is to do what with whom and for how long. And whatever words we need to use in order to get them to do what we want, it's not a matter of being a side caller. Oh, is that where you end up? That's not side calling, guys. You have to know at least 2 calls in advance what you're going to call next. And in order to make that decision correctly, you have to place many factors through your brain cells and processing as to determine, are they going to be able to succeed or making this too difficult? That's all part of your preparation work. You have a question, sir?
Yes. I want to ask you about this, in a sense, the reverse side of the same subject. I have seen a lot of very polished callers use the same concept to do what I would consider a square dance joke. That is, kind of set them up for one thing, but then call something else, not to hammer anybody, but to cause that hesitation and the dancers as a group seem to really like it, although I've never understood why. And let me give you an example. We've been using half tag, trade, and fan the top. Let's say you worked them up to the place where they were being successful at that, and then later in the evening you did a half tag, trade, and roll. And chances are everyone's going to make it, but all of it, suddenly that's going to be like a square dance joke. I have tried that a few times, and my punchlines are horrendously awful. Give us some suggestions on, first of all, whether you can like the use of that or judgment that you use in doing that.
Okay. I will answer your question first by saying, depending upon how you time the delivery of your calls. As an example, in a singing call, if your ending to the corner progression is pass through, trade by, and swing your corner, and the last time through, you want to change it just a little bit to say pass through, trade by, swing through, boys trade, girls turn around and promenade. You better give that call swing through before they've done that pass through in the center. The timing of the delivery of the call will enable them to have that variation and succeed without saying, you dirty, you tricked me. It's arrogance on the part of the caller if you deliberately trick the dancer and laugh at them because they made a mistake. And I think that's the risk that you run as a caller. If your judgment is bad and the reaction of the floor is such that that's arrogance, pure and simple arrogance. Bow to your partner, bow to your corner, circle to the right. If the dancers get upset at that, you've got no one to blame but yourself, because you have deliberately suckered them into it as a half tag, trade, and fan the top. If they're expecting you to call roll, or they're expecting you to call fan the top, and you sucker them in half tag, fan the top, and now trade, what do you expect? The sequence of that, you see, whether it's correct technically or not is immaterial. The timing of how we give that call. If it's going to have variety, you have to give them more lead time for their processes to take place and be able to succeed. That's success by design.
Well, what you're doing is arguing against the use of it, period, on the basis of smooth dancing and all the things that we've talked about in this session. That's why I said it's kind of the reverse the reverse subject.
I'm giving you an example of how you can make that smooth without sacrificing the smooth dancing that Steve talked about by the delivery of your call. Pass through, trade by, swing through, boys trade, girls turn around and promenade will still be smooth, but you better have affected the timing as to when you give those commands.
I think to some degree he really did go ahead and answer it. I think that it's a fine line between deception and catching me with my pants down. You know, the situation is that you want them to get the joke out of them making the incorrect assumption that you were going to continue in the same pattern. Okay? Well, I don't think that's really fair. I think that's really fair as long as you delivered it fairly, that you delivered it in the same methodology that you would normally give the whole dance. If they are working honestly and are given an honest chance to succeed, and they do not succeed because of their assumption at that point, then yes, the joke's legitimate. But if you hold back information, if you say hashtag traded, bro, that's not playing the game fairly. It's a situation where you go dive through, square through three, stick out a left and slide through. You're deceiving at that point, and that's not playing the game fairly. I think you can find the joke in setting them up along that line by the pattern that John was talking about in the singing call, where you change it at least a little bit there. But he allowed them the chance to win.
Let me see if I can put this even in a different way. I think it may boil down to, in my mind, attitude. And I think if the dancers feel that you want them to get it, but you're being creative, they're going to be on your side. If they feel like you're trying to trick them, there seems to be a fine line between tricking and creativity. And I think it boils down to attitude. If the dancers feel like you want them to get it, but you're just being creative, they're going to laugh when you say, oh, bow to your partner, bow to your corner, join hands, circle right. That's cute. Unless they're perceiving you as trying to trick them. And while you were talking back and forth, I thought, what is the difference here? And I really think it just boils down to attitude. You want them to think you're on their side. You want them to be successful. That's the whole bottom line, is dancing them, but being creative. And if they feel like you have a good attitude, but yeah, you'll do a little gimmick here and there and you'll be a little cute, well, that's okay. As long as they feel like you're on their side. And I think that's what it boils down to, is the attitude that you're perceiving, that you want them to get it, but you want to be different.
Humor is a touchy business. And this lines up to the middle and back, right and left, grand, is the kind of thing that I think you were asking about. That right but wrong kind of thing. Where am I?
I think you've effectively addressed it. No, I wasn't. I was talking about telling an effective joke. And an effective joke does not blow everybody away, because that's not an effective joke. An effective joke is one that caught people a little off guard, but they still succeeded a little bit, but it came as a surprise. Okay, so I wasn't talking about, purposely hammering people. I was telling a good joke and have it succeed. Okay. And I think you've addressed it.
Frank?
Yes, on the handout that we had for the factors in square dance difficulty, number 7 is the anticipation, the anticipatory factor. And the gotcha syndrome can be abused. It's cute to a point.
Yeah, two things I'd like to leave you with. Number one, it's up to you. There are probably 10 little words that really say it up quite well. If it is to be, it's up to me. And the other thing was something which I heard, I think I don't know how many times I've heard it before, but every once in a while I think it's excellent to be reminded of it. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if you keep that attitude, it's an attitudinal adjustment to be sure. But they really don't care how much you know as a caller. We care. We want to be choreographically smart. But until we show them that we genuinely care for them, they don't really care how much we know. I would like to thank our 3 panelists, Mr. John Sybalsky, Mike Jacobs, and Steve Kopman. I'd like to thank all of you for attending, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of the convention. Thank you for being here.